Greetings and welcome to the basement. This is a continuation of my incremental game tutorial series. This is the second video in the series, in case you are watching this, just randomly found this on the internet. So a little bit about the series, or specifically this video. The previous video, you do want to go watch that before following along with this one, because in that video I outline all of the packages that I am going to be using. As you can see here, I've got quite a few things loaded up here inside of Unity, and you'll need to make sure that you got those loaded up, because at some point that's really going to slow you down if you don't have those. Also, I normally try to avoid jump cuts. I've got the cough from heck, so yeah, there's going to be the occasional jump cut. 99% of the time that's going to be because I started coughing. Alright, so what do you need to have done for this video, and what are we going to do in this video? You need to make sure that you already have everything loaded up, and you will want to have already spent some thought on your incremental game if you're going to try to make something that's not a carbon copy of mine. If you are going to make a carbon copy of mine, which is perfectly okay. I mean, that's kind of the point of a tutorial series, is it not? You will need to reference this. I will hopefully remember to get this link to the video page as soon as possible, so that way people can look on it, or look at it. Again, as I mentioned in the previous video, you want to have some kind of an outline done before you start trying to create something. Otherwise, you are asking for trouble. So again, my general idea is I'm having two resources that feed into a third resource, manual gathering or creation, and auto gathering for all of them, and I need to ship from the two to the third. So I have got this. My three materials are soul kyanite, mithril, and materium from a world that I've been creating. Fun fact, kyanite's an actual crystal. It's a very cool blue-looking crystal. So those need to be gathered in order to create materium. Camera positions, sort of did some outlining here. I need 3 camera positions for the positions for the kyanite and mithril. You know, I need this information in buttons. For materium, I need some additional information. And materium is the sort of the currency of the world, so that's what's going to be driving all of the costs. So basically, resource A and B creates resource C, and then resource C, in my particular case, is what's used to buy upgrades and things like that. So let's take a look at what we got going on here in Unity. So all of these things down here are my imports. And so what I'm going to do, just to avoid confusion, because when you start importing in a bunch of stuff for Unity projects, your assets list is going to start looking like this. You're going to have stuff everywhere. So to get things just a teeny bit more organized, I am going to right-click Create Folder, and I am going to create. Let's see here. I just realized I haven't even actually come up with a name for this project yet, other than that incremental game. So for the moment, I'm just going to call this folder My Game. And inside of here, I'm going to put a scripts folder. Actually, I'm going to rename that to Logic and UI. I generally tend to separate my scripts based on logic and UI coding. And I just realized, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this little goof in here. I don't actually need this because I'm using Playmaker to drive everything. It's just instinct for me to create script sections, so yeah, okay, get rid of those. I'm still going to want my folder here for anything that I create specifically for this project. So, okay, I don't think... Oh, and I was in Playmaker Utilities. Why am I in Playmaker Utilities? Alright, let me get that out of here. Drag. Okay, that's better. Okay, all good. Now, I'm also going to immediately save my scene here, and I'm going to call this main game. And what I'm going to work on first is getting a quick sort of rough terrain set up, and then from there work on getting my camera positions set up and bouncing around. So actually I don't even think we'll get to Playmaker in this video sequence for that matter. But okay, alright, let's continue on. So a terrain, of course, can be found in game object through the object terrain. Unity terrains use height maps. So this is basically just a height map. It has all the properties of a height map, which means it's, I can't like have cliffs I'm sorry, I can have cliffs, but I can't have like overhangs or form the terrain into too interesting of shapes. I can't have vertical cliffs because of how height maps work. There's people out there that are interested in a technical lecture on how exactly these things work. I guess leave something in the comments, and I'll see what I can do on that. Alright, so I got my terrain. Switch over to Inspector here. And this is where I'm going to use the Terrain Toolkit. The Terrain Toolkit was originally written in the Google Summer of Code, way back in the Unity 3.3 days. And so it was released under an open source license by the creator. I've taken it and updated it so that way it'll work fine now on Unity 5 without causing a bunch of errors. The download for that, the TUI, I can talk, I promise. The download link for that is in the previous video, as a reminder on that. Okay, so first things first. Perlin is usually the only one that I use. Okay, so actually first, let's see here. Unity terrains by default. This went to the gear symbol here for modifying my terrain values. The default terrain width and length of the Unity terrain is 500 meters by 500 meters. That's actually quite a bit of play space. That you might think that sounds a little bit small, but if you actually put a character controller in here and start walking around, that's a pretty good sized area. Given that I'm not actually going to be walking around, I probably don't need the area this big, but the Terrain Toolkit works a little bit better when you've got a larger terrain than 500 by 500, so that's really the only reason why I am doing that. Okay, so using the Terrain Toolkit, now that I think about it, I don't think I actually talked through adding that in. So I just clicked on Add Component, did a search for TERR, and added in the script Terrain Toolkit. That's all there is to it. Alright, so Perlin is usually the only generation method that you want, unless you're like just adding noise in or something. Let's start with rough plains. Yeah, speaking as a guy from Kansas, I'm not sure where they're getting the idea that this looks like rough plains, but yeah, work with it. Alright, so let's see here. Rough plains, rolling hills. Yeah. No. I think I'll go back to rough plains. Okay, so a quick word on these things here. Amplitude is like how high it goes. So like what is the max height? So notice it's 0.5. The height of this terrain is 600. Therefore, the largest area that I can probably find on here, looks like these peaks over here, probably be around 300. See, there you go, 295. Yeah, it looks like that actually is my highest point right there, 297. And so that's what the amplitude does. I probably need some amplitude in here. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I'll turn my amplitude down to 0.25 and pull down my octaves a little bit. And that pulls down things, I think, a little bit too much. So let's put the amplitude back up to 0.5. I don't want to spend too much time on this because, again, the visuals don't matter too much on this, but I do want it to look decent. And I think that actually might be pretty good. Yeah, I'll stay with that. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to perfectly match this, so just hit the Generate Purlin Terrain button a couple of times until you get something that looks good to you, and continue on. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this Dayglow just sheet of ice material that they have by default. So again, using the Terrain Toolkit, I'm going to go into its Texture tab here. And I'm just going to go ahead and add in all 4 of the texture slots here. Unity's splat maps operate on 4 textures. So every splat map can have up to 4 textures. So I don't save anything by not adding in all 4 textures. Now if I add in a 5th texture, whoops, that generates a new splat map. So generally speaking, you are going to want to have your textures in multiples of 4, because that's the most efficient. So, if you have 5, well, you might as well toss in 3 more, because it's really not going to cost you much of anything, performance-wise. So, okay, cliff texture is applied to vertical surfaces, so I'm just going to see here. Actually, I think I've got a couple of different cliff textures here. Let's see here, Nature Starter Kit, Textures. Yeah, that's right, yeah, this one doesn't really come with any good. There's a couple of good base ground ones. So, come back over here. And just leave this under standard cliff. Now, the Terrain Toolkit was made before the normals were a thing for terrains. So we can't actually set the normal here. We'll have to go to a different window to set the normal. But I can set the cliff. Let's see here. Ground. I'll set the ground to ground 2. Then, you know what? I think I will grab the grass hill albedo from there. And I think actually grass rocky albedo for that one. And then come up here to texture settings on the terrain, grab the cliff, and set the cliff normal here. Also, while I'm here, I'm going to set the size. Notice how this cliff pattern is extremely repetitive. Seamless. Now, if I fly in here, I can't see the seams between the textures, but it's got a very strong repeating pattern to it. You can hide that for things that you don't plan on getting too close to by bumping up the size. So it makes it a little bit less apparent. It'll also be a lot less apparent once we get some additional color in here. Alright, so applying procedural textures with the Terrain Toolkit. I've got an entire video on using this thing, so this is just going to be brief. Cliff start is the angle at which you start blending in the cliff material. Cliff end is the angle at which the cliff material is at fully opaque, full alpha value. So I'm going to start with 25, end at 55, have a little bit of a blur across there, and apply. And actually, I might pull that down to 45. Apply. Maybe increase that to 15, get a little bit more. There we go. That gives me some stronger starting points for my areas. And let's see here, this texture one end, I'll pull that way the heck down. Again, this is percentage of height values. So 0 meaning height value 0, 1 meaning height value 600. So what you sometimes end up doing is using the paint to height tool and looking around and saying, okay, well, I want my grass to start here. Grab that height value, Oops. And what was that, 23? Yeah, I was thinking it was like 23 or 27 divided by 600, so that's 0.045. So, coming back down here, 0.03, and this should then be 0.04. Again, the start and end, this is where it starts blending in, this is where it's fully blended in. And you need to be brought way the heck down. So you can see we've got a fairly narrow blend spot there, and a much higher blend range. That's how it very slowly increases up through there. And let's see here, I might pull that back a little bit more. Pull that one back a little bit more. Okay. So that's good enough. That gives me a pretty good starting point. Now, of course, the important thing to remember on things like this is procedural is always the starting point. It is never the finished product. We still want to go through and customize this. So what I need to do now is find camera positions. So this spot over here actually looks like a pretty good spot, potentially, for a mining setup. So I'm going to take this main camera and do a Control-Shift-F, which, if you're not familiar with that shortcut, is align with view. It takes the selected game object and snaps it to that view. And another thing that I need to do, okay, and I did this at the start, all right. I'm just going to mention this again. I can't remember if I actually talked much about this in the previous video. Should probably go back and review that. Setting your screen resolution. You want to do that immediately because otherwise that's going to potentially really cause you some headache. All right, and I'm getting this bug. So this is something that will show up from time to time when working with terrains. I haven't quite narrowed down what causes this, but basically the scene editor camera that you have gets displaced. That's about the best way I can describe it from its focal point. So you can't get too close to something before you've basically passed the camera's clip plane. And it comes off, it happens a lot when you do use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. You can see there, it's still doing it pretty bad. Usually the best way to fix this is either to use the F key to change your focus, like so. The problem with that is the F key doesn't always function sanely. So sometimes you'll zoom in like that, sometimes you'll zoom out to see the entire terrain. It's a little bit twitchy. Or if you've got another basic game object in the scene, you can focus on that. Nope, not the main directional light, the camera. Thank you. And that will also, notice now I can get in and see all the glorious ugly muddiness of this texture. That's because I have it scaled up too high. It's not designed to be looked at from that close up. I'm just looking for frame. Okay, yeah, I think that will be a pretty good framing, especially once we get some trees in here and some more rocks. So I'm going to snap this camera. Now I'm only going to have one camera in the scene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this camera hop around between these different points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty game object here. Empty game objects are one of your best buddies in Unity game development. You can use these things for so much stuff. So I'm going to right click on the camera, say create empty. And now here's the thing about children-parent relationships. Notice how this game object is indented under main camera. Main camera has this little down arrow that I can use to collapse things, indicating that game object is a child object of main camera. Children objects, when you're looking at their information in the inspector, and this is only in the inspector, by the way, when you access them through code, the default transform information is going to be absolute world coordinates, not relative. But right now, this is relative coordinates, all zeros. But if I break the link, drag it out, notice my position and rotation information change. Basically, by zeroing out this game object, this child object, I'm basically assigning it the values of this game object here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F2 and rename this. I'm going to call this mine location. Also, to be able to find this, because if I back out, I mean, if I got it selected with the widget, I can see where it is. But I'm going to move the main camera. Okay, where's my mine location? I don't know. I can't see it. So what you can do, it's a very useful trick, is on this cube here, if you click on it, you have the option of applying either a colored label, or you have the option of applying a dot or triangle. So I'm going to do yellow for my cameras. And now, even when I deselect it, it's got that label there. And that will always be visible regardless of anything else that happens to try to get in the way. So I'll always know where my mine location is. Alright, so I need a forest ruin location. I gotta be careful. I don't want the player to be able to see the edge of the world. So let's come. There we go. I think I can put some good runes here. So yeah, some heavily forested areas here with some runes tossed in. I think that'll work out okay. So I'm going to snap my game camera to here. Just check to make sure it looks okay in my game view, because that's what I'll actually be seeing later on. Looks okay for the moment. Might end up changing that later. And again, I'm going to create an empty game object, break the link, rename this to forest ruin location. And for the workshop, I'm going to cheat for the moment. I don't know, do I want to cheat? There's my... Oops, and I need to change. I need to tag it. Yeah, I want to cheat. Sort of the implication is that our location is, our workshop is someplace else. So I'm going to come down here, and just as a really temporary thing, I am going to grab a 3D game object cube, snap it to where my camera is. I'm going to reset the rotation by clicking on the gear symbol here and saying reset rotation. Back off a little bit there. And scale for now, I'll put at 1515. And I'll drop one of my concrete textures on here. Let's see here. Concrete 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that one. I'll do that one. Not exactly medievally, though. Okay, that works better, because again, I gotta remind myself this is a temporary thing. Don't spend too much time on it. And snap my camera. Create an empty game object. This one I'm not going to bother checking to see if it looks good yet, because this one I know I'm going to have to reposition. And workshop. Location. And I'm going to take that space out just to keep things consistent. Consistency is a good thing to strive for. Um, there we go. All those. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll organize them. Empty game objects are also a really great way to keep things organized in your scene. So I'm going to rename this to _ camera locations. And I'm going to grab those and toss them in there. Not that it really matters particularly all that much in this case, but I did reset my empty game object to 0. Also notice that I put an underscore in front of there. I'll be honest, I shamelessly stole this organizational idea from Shroud of the Avatar, because I noticed in their scenes that that's how they had stuff organized, was that underscore, and I'm like, hey, that's a great idea for indicating that an object's an organizational object and doesn't actually have anything functional attached to it. I'm going to take that. You won't find a greater bunch of thieves than you will in the creative professions. But I suppose I should say inspired to make it sound better. Okay. So that has that's all nice and set up now. And this is a fairly good breakpoint, so I'm going to break the video here. The next video we will actually dig into the Playmaker script logic necessary to bounce between these locations, and then we'll start putting in some UI. So until the next video, take care.